expensive way to something that costs a little bit more money, but I have found to be very valuable. My first problem was, everybody knows that your ruler kind of slips or things can get out of line when you are trying to use a rotary cutter and a ruler, especially if it doesn't have any sticky points on the back of it. And I had that problem when I first started. So I started using a ruler or yardstick that's clamped to my cutting table so that I have something to butt at least one part of the process together. In this particular time, I'm going to butt my fabric together. Now, when I'm preparing the fabric, I want to make sure that I have a good, straight, folded edge, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make sure that that lines up with one of the lines on my mat, because that's what's going to give me a straight strip. If this is crooked, you're going to end up with a crooked strip, and a crooked strip is practically has no use at all. So down here I have it about a ½ inch longer than I have it over here. So I want to go ahead first of all, and I want to line up my ruler on my number line there to give me a straight bottom across this piece of fabric. I have this ruler is on the half mark line right down here, and I clipped it there on purpose, and it's straight across. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my plastic ruler that's going to be my guide right at 2½ inches up, and then I'm going to cut my strip, just cutting across. This ruler is pretty good because it doesn't slide much, and since I've got my fabric butted up against the bottom of the mat right next to the ruler, I can kind of be pretty sure that I'm going to get a straight strip if I just keep lining my fabric up there, lining my ruler up on that particular mark. On this particular thing, it's a 4½, it's right at a 4 inch. And now I have my piece, my jelly roll strip cut. It's very straight and it works out really well. So that was my first way of doing this with the least amount of cost. The next way that I'm going to show you is using the June Taylor shape cut ruler. Now this comes in 2 sizes. This is the smaller size. The other size is wider, and you can cut more strips at once without having to move your fabric or move your ruler. The key to making this really work well is to make sure that your fabric is folded very carefully. So what I did is I lined up my selvages and I ironed them down, and then I very carefully folded my fabric in half again so that that first folded edge lines up with my selvage. Then I went ahead and I straightened the bottom of my fabric. Make sure this is on the line and straight. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the 0 right down. Keep turning this around. Put the 0 right down on the bottom edge, because that's where I'm going to start counting. Okay, since I want 2½ inch strips, the June Taylor ruler is marked in 1 inches, and then it has ½ inch slots in between. So I want to go to the 2 and then the 2½, and I slip my rotary cutter into this little opening, and I can just cut right across it, and I have a strip. Now I can either lift it up and look at it, or right now I'm going to cut a couple of them. So from 2½ I want to go to 5 inches. Put my rotary cutter in there and cut across. And sometimes these rotary cutters are so sharp that sometimes you can cut a little notch into this plastic, and then it doesn't kind of start off as smoothly as you would like. So just take a little X-Acto knife and kind of cut off that little burr. And then we're going to go from 7½ to 10. and then from 10 I can't go any farther because mine only goes up to 12. So let's take a look and let's see if the strips are straight, because the one thing that you don't want if you're doing jelly roll projects is to have strips that have a bow in them. That looks pretty straight to me, and I would be happy with that. I would say that that worked really well, and I would be able to use these in my next project that I'm going to do. Now called the ultimate straight cutting tool. It's made by a company called Altos, and it's called Quilt Cut 2. And it was about $225, so it's not inexpensive. But what it has rails for the ruler, so that I can move my ruler up and down this way, or I can take it off and I can move it and slide it this way. And I can also angle my ruler if I want to make bias cuts. I can make this type of 60-degree angle, or here's the 60. I can go ahead and I can make a 45-degree if I want to use bias. So it's really a wonderful tool to be able to make sure that you're cutting correctly. There's another part to it that helps me to cut and measure that I hardly ever use, that comes out and measures the edge. I don't know where that is, so I can't show that to you. But I want to show you how this helps me to cut my 2.5-inch strips. First of all, I find that so many fabric stores do not cut straight. So here this came from the fabric store, and look how far off it is. Again, I lined up my selvages and I got myself a straight edge over here, and I put that on one of the lines on my grid mark on my Quilt Cut 2. And now I'm going to trim this off at the bottom and make my line straight. The thing that's great about it is the ruler doesn't move. Okay, now you do need to hold it down a little bit because it can wiggle a little bit, but not much. And so it really makes doing accurate cuts really easy and fast. So here I am at 16, so I want to go down 16, 15, 14 and a half. So I want to put my ruler on that mark on this side and on that mark on this side, and then I can do my cut. And here I've got my strip. And then I'm going to move up. I'm going to go from 14 and a half, a ½ inch, 1, 2. I always do that. My math in my head sometimes isn't so good, so I want to make sure that I'm cutting correctly, or I'll end up having a strip I can't use. All right, I'm at 11, so I want to go to 9 and a half. And there I've got my really, really straight strips that I can use for my jelly roll project. Today I'm going to be working on a jelly roll project that is going to be using cupcake fabric. And so the reds that I've just cut are going to be part of that project. If you do a lot of sewing and you do a lot of cutting and you want to invest in a tool that is very useful, I always have this on my table. I have cut so many things with it. You can cut charm squares, you can cut layer cake squares, you can cut any size square or block. You can square things up on it. I always have it out and I always use it, and to me it was very much worth the money that I spent. The one thing that I have to find out from Altos is this mat is getting a little bit grooved. It's fine for me because it's grooved in the 2.5-inch spaces, but I know it's going to wear out, so I will need to get a new one someday.